Welcome to the Devils Illustrated Recruiting Chat. I'm Brian McLawhorn, publisher of devilsillustrated.com, part of the Rivals.com and Yahoo Sports Network. I'm joined today by our very own Clint Jackson, Director of Recruiting for us here at Devils Illustrated. So welcome, Clint. Glad to see you. We haven't had a chance to get together since hoops has not been going on. It's kind of that time of season that we hang out a little bit.
I miss you, man. I usually get to see you every April or May, and it doesn't look like I'm going to get to see you this year. Hopefully, recruiting events will start back in June or July, so I'll probably see you then. But yeah, it's a very unusual spring, and recruiting is still going on. But the one thing we're missing is all these events, and what happens with these events is all these new names pop up.
Yeah, definitely. That's the big thing. I mean, we've had at this time of year, we've had a chance to see quite a few guys that maybe weren't on the radar, like you mentioned, that suddenly are on the radar because coaches have had a chance to go out and watch guys, get a better feel for them after their high school season. So, it is a little bit different. We don't have quite the analysis to work off of like we normally would at this time of year, but we have seen quite a few guys over the years. So, and last year through USA basketball and throughout the high school season, I know you saw some guys. And just the AU schedule. So what we'll do today is we'll just talk about some of these players, get a little bit of a scouting report. You and I have seen so many of them. We can just kind of dive into their games a little bit and the guys that are primarily on Duke's target at this point. And I think we'll also talk about a guy or two maybe that Duke hasn't gotten involved with yet. So I guess let's just start off. I'll just toss some names to you, and we'll go back and forth with some of this. And I think the first guy on my list, a lot of guys, a lot of subscribers are definitely interested in Patrick Baldwin. He's one of the guys that's considered, a guy that Duke's got a really good chance at getting. So what's your take on Patrick? I know he brings a lot to the table, and he fits that mold of a player that Duke typically likes to recruit.
Yeah, I think Patrick Baldwin is a good guy to start with. Patrick, you and I have seen him several times. He's a 6'8", 6'9" guy, probably closer to 6'9". He's very slender, but he's got that long, versatile, skilled game. And so many guys with that sort of skill set do well at Duke because of the way they spread the floor. And they operate kind of a 4-out, 1-in philosophy when they can. He's a guy that can really shoot the ball well. It looks great coming out of his hands, plenty of backspin. He can catch and shoot, or he can also shoot it on the move. He's got that skilled handle. He's got that feel. He's got that savvy. He's very intelligent, has a high IQ. I think from a player comparison standpoint, he compares very favorably to Shane Battier. The way that Shane Battier was a face-up four-man with a high skill level and a lot of patience and poise about him. He's an athlete, but that's not the thing that really jumps out at you with Patrick Baldwin. I think the thing that jumps out at you is just how skilled he is. Probably not quite the defender that Shane Battier was coming out of high school, but he may be a little bit more loose in his hips off of his dribble than Battier. So really good player, outstanding academic kid, personality, everything fits really well with the types of kids that Duke recruits for that position.
Yeah, I agree with all that you said. I mean, one of the things you started off with talking about is slight build. And I think you and I both, though, over the last 2 years have seen him start to bulk up a little bit, get a little stronger. And we've seen how that has impacted his game. He's been a lot more confident on the court. He's kind of that quiet guy. And I think what I saw him, how I saw him advance as a player more than anything from 2018 to 2019 was that confidence and self-assurance of himself on the floor. I think before he kind of deferred a little bit to some of the older guys. And last year we started to see him assert himself and become that, I don't want to say alpha because that's not his personality, but he certainly was a bigger presence. And, I agree. He's so skilled. One of the things that impresses me about him, we talk about his shooting because he can shoot lights out. He's got a great handle. He's so smooth. But one thing I think that gets overlooked a little bit is he does have great footwork and ability to move with his back to the basket. I mean, we won't see him with his back to the basket a lot, but he can play in the post if needed, and he can really become a matchup problem because of that for opposing teams. So I like him. I think he's a great fit for Duke. And if they play their cards right, I think they're in that great position to land him.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think we saw him first as a sophomore, and then we saw him as a junior, and you could tell that he probably put on a good 20 pounds in that year. And because he's so long and has the broad shoulders and lean, you imagine somebody putting on 20 pounds. It was 20 pounds of really good weight. He's still lean and he's slender, but he's more able to hold his own on the inside. He's a little bit better rebounder, and as you said, his confidence just took a big jump in the last year. He's a legit top 5, top 6 player in 2021 that I've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move on. Patrick is obviously a guy we'll keep an eye on going forward. To some other guys here, though. Let's take a look at some guys. Now, I haven't seen Kennedy Chandler in person. I take that back. I have seen him in person, but when I saw him at USA, he wasn't really a Duke target at that point, or at least it had not been public knowledge. There had not been a lot of talk about him and his connection with Duke. So I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to him. I did watch him some. I do remember him being a guy that had that explosive bounce and surprisingly that explosive bounce, and a guy that saw the floor really well. But beyond that, I just don't remember a whole lot about him. And I'm really missing that opportunity right now with AAU basketball not happening to go back and watch him really closely and, kind of get that grasp of what he can do and what it is that Duke likes so much about him. You've paid a little more attention to him than I have. I think you might be kind of in the same boat a little bit. But can you talk about what you see with Kennedy Chandler and why you think he's a guy that Duke covets so much?
Absolutely. Kennedy Chandler, like you said, I wasn't really focusing on him, but I did see one of his games. And I've talked to a lot of people who really love him, college coaches, other recruiting scouts, his dad, people who, are just trying to get intel. But what I really like about him, he's only about 6 foot tall. So he's not a huge guy, not a 6'3", 6'4" point guard that a lot of guys love that size. But I would liken him a little bit to Chris Paul, in that he may be more slight of build, but he has an incredible feel for the game. He's a guy that's always going to remain poised. He doesn't get rushed. He's not going to get sped up. He's not going to get caught up in that sort of chaotic AAU stuff that you and I watch. We see so much chaos with AAU. Everybody's running and gunning and turning the ball over, and it gets out of control. He really has a calm, poised presence about him. That's one of my favorite things that I saw. He's also going to defend. He's going to lock in. He's going to defend. He's an athlete, like you said. He can play above the rim at 6 foot. It's not a surprise to see him go down the lane, cock that ball back, and tomahawk dunk. I think you saw that while we were at USA. But he's definitely a guy that he's the best point guard in the 2021 class that I've seen. And I think Rivals.com national analysts, Eric Bossy, Corey Evans, those guys would agree because they have him. I think the number 10 prospect overall and number 1 point guard in his class. But, just a guy who's going to be able to run the team. He's an athlete. He's poised. He'll defend. He shoots the ball okay, not his strong point. But just calm in chaos is the best thing I could say about him. He has a really good feel and flow to the game, and he's always gonna run his team.
Those are all important things for Duke. I mean, I know Krzyzewski values all of those things, particularly that ability to keep his poise and be able to control things. He relies so much on those guards. Look at Trey Jones and Tyus Jones in the past. Those are the guys he expects to really have his other players build off of. So that'll be key, particularly with not knowing exactly what Jeremy Roach will be doing in the future. Getting that guy is of high value for Duke. So let's talk a little bit about another big guy, Paolo Banchero. You and I saw him a few times last year, and I know when I first laid my eyes on him, he jumped out right away to be a player that Duke should be involved with. And I don't remember if they were really involved with him at the time we saw him first, but he stood out amongst all the big men at the NBA Top 100 camp. And, he's not that power, big man, center type guy. I mean, he's that face-up, really multifaceted player that can take bigger guys off the dribble. He's a nightmare for bigger guys defensively because, I mean, he doesn't have the handle that some, like maybe a Chet Holmgren, who we'll talk about a little bit later, but some of those guys have. But he has the ability to get to the basket when facing up, and he's got a serviceable shot too, so that keeps guys honest. And I like that he doesn't try to play outside of himself. He really sticks to what he's good at and doesn't try to play this power game when he doesn't need to play a power game. I remember seeing him at the NBA Top 100 camp, and he used his high IQ, his ability, his great footwork, and to get to the basket. He used the rim against bigger defenders to help him, fend off shot blockers. Just his ability to really play his strengths against his opponent's weaknesses was impressive to me. What are your thoughts about him, and why do you think he's could be such a good fit for Duke as well? And he's a guy that I think there's a little more question in where he's going to end up than some of these other schools or with other players for other schools. He's got a lot of questions going on with the local schools. Kentucky, of course, being so heavily involved. So I know Duke covets him, but what are your thoughts about him and just what jumps off the page?
You said a lot of it. I think you and I, one thing that we do is when we watch players together, we constantly talk and we constantly share our opinions. And I mean, and if you weren't a publisher, you could easily be a scout too, because you see the game really well, and you see how you could utilize a guy like Paolo Banchero in space and using different matchups. I think the only thing you said everything so well. I feel like I don't have much to add, but I think one of the things that I probably thought he was a little bit better than maybe you did is I thought he was a terrific ball handler for a power forward. If you look at him as a power forward, he's a terrific ball handler for a power forward. Almost, I don't want to compare him to Kevin Knox as much, because Kevin Knox floated more on the three-point line than I probably would have liked. But like Kevin Knox, he's that guy that has that size and that strength. He can play inside and outside. He can get the ball off the defensive glass and lead the break. He's quick like Knox was. He's got that athleticism, and you utilize him all over the floor. So many times when we were watching him play, you and I were watching him at the NBA Top 100, I think it was, and he was playing with Jalen Johnson. And you and I were there watching Jalen Johnson mainly, and we started focusing on Banchero because we're like, wow, this kid's terrific. And out of the two prospects, no disrespect to Jalen Johnson, who's a great player in his own right, but Banchero was the one that jumped out at us because he was like a bigger, more physical version of Jalen Johnson. He had that handle. His jump shot, as you said, is pretty good. It's not broken. He can hit it. You can't slack off of him. But just his footwork, when he went to isolate and go one-on-one against, wing forwards or bigger big men, it's going to be tough to match up with a guy like that because he's just so versatile.
Yeah, you touched on that when we saw in person. I had forgotten that it was with Jalen, but I remember the two of us having those conversations about how Paolo was the guy that was, like you were saying, jumping off the court. He was the guy that we were just drawn to naturally. It wasn't so much that he was just, he was that highly skilled and worthy of our attention, but we were just drawn to him, naturally drawn to him. And I think part of that too was he commanded so much respect on the court. He had that personality. And again, I don't know that I would call him alpha, but he was certainly assertive. More than Patrick Baldwin in that regard. He was a guy that made his presence felt. So be interesting to see. I think, it's going to be a tough recruitment for Duke. But man, if they can pull that guy in, he'll be a fun one for Duke fans to watch for a year or however that translates.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Banchero, from everything I've seen, is one of the top 2 or 3 best players in 2021 in my viewpoint. Probably a bit like Jabari Parker in that he is, got a little bigger body than some of these long wings that Duke brings in, but you can use him in a similar way that you use Parker. You can isolate him, down low with his back to the basket, or give it to him on the elbow and let him go to work and face up a slower big man, the way that Duke spaces that floor. Again, like a Kevin Knox, Jabari Parker sort of hybrid there, but I think he's more efficient than Knox, and probably a little bit quicker than Jabari Parker.
So let's move on to yet another prospect. Now you're talking about the top guys in class 21, and most of these are. I mean, they're all top 25 type players that we're talking about here. But one of the guys that is considered maybe the top prospect in the class, Jon Kuminga. I haven't seen him play, so I can't really speak too much to, other than what I've seen highlights from. And we all know what highlights do for you. They don't really tell you a whole lot about a player. They tell you what they can do well, but they don't tell you what they do in a system or how they fit into a team aspect. But you have seen him. So tell me a little bit about him and what you like about his game.
I saw Kuminga at the John Wall Holiday Invitational in Raleigh. I believe he was playing with the Patrick School from New Jersey. And that was the first time I'd actually seen him live. So Kuminga is one of he could be the best player in 2021. If not, he's second. He's another guy, 6'8", 6'9", strong body, ferocious athlete. You're talking about a guy who has that quick twitch, muscle fiber, and can explode off the floor and violently dunk the basketball. He can take people off the dribble. He's a native of Africa, and a lot of times with some of the African kids, you get that explosive athleticism and size, but it takes him a little while to develop the ball skills. He's very far advanced with the ball skills, and he still has room to grow. So, he can take people off the dribble. He can actually shoot it on the move. He's a pretty good shooter. So you have to guard him out at the three-point line. He can hit threes. He can, do that little head nod in transition and get the defender to bite and go by him and baseline tomahawk. He's very explosive. He's very difficult to guard. And even the best guys in the country, guys like Banchero, guys like Baldwin, guys like Holmgren, they're going to have a tough time matching his quickness. I think that's one of the biggest things about him is there's so many versatile guys that are at the top of the class in the top 10, and we're talking about a lot of them right now. But I think Kuminga has slightly more athleticism and he's slightly quicker than all of them, yet he still retains that versatile skill set.
Let me ask you, too, about his personality and what you saw with him on the court. What kind of guy did you see in terms of his presence and how he was on the floor? I mean, we know Patrick Baldwin is that cerebral Shane Battier guy, and Banchero to a degree of that, and a little bit of alpha in there as well. What do you see with Kuminga?
Kuminga plays a little bit angry. Like he's got a chip on his shoulder. He plays with an edge that's likable to see. He's not real vocal. He's not that vocal type of alpha, but he's got that ability to just kind of do it with his game. You just appreciate the energy that he brings, and the not to use the word alpha because I don't think that accurately describes him, but he plays like an alpha without all the dramatics.
It sounds very R.J. Barrett-ish. Is that accurate at all?
Yeah, definitely in his personality. I could see that. He's obviously going to play more of a 4-3 role probably than Barrett was more of a 2-3 and sometimes 1. But just playing with that intensity, but yet not showing all the emotion and not all the fanfare and the showing up the crowd and all that stuff. That's actually a really good peg there. I like that.
All right, let's move to some more guard play here. Max Christie, a guy you and I both have seen. We both like him a lot. I think one of the underappreciated aspects of his game because he's that hybrid combo guard guy, at least in my opinion. I think he's around 6'6", so he's got that height and he's that length. He's just so long. But one of the underappreciated aspects of his game, to me, is his ability to find his teammates. I think he's a really good distributor of the basketball, despite the fact he's so good in transition. He attacks the basket well. He's a good shooter. He's got a great handle. I mean, he's just so quick and silky smooth, I think. But I've been impressed with his ability to find his teammates. I mean, he's not Trey Jones. He's not one of those, super pass first point guard type guys. But I think that's an aspect of his game. What do you see with him? What's jumped out to you?
I think with him, I've seen him, and I think the first time I saw him was 2 years ago at the NBA Top 100 camp, and nobody really knew who he was, but I kept tweeting about him. Like you said, he's about 6'6". He's got long arms. He can play the 1, the 2, and probably even the 3. I'm trying to think of a player comparison for him. There was a kid at Ohio State a handful of years ago that was like a 6'6" sort of guard forward. I can't recall his name right now. Maybe I need another cup of coffee, but it may jump out to you here. But it was Evan Turner. May have been like an Evan Turner sort of player. He's smooth, like you said. He gets by people and doesn't even look like he's running fast to do it. So again, that just naturally leads you to smooth or sneaky. He's getting the lane. He's a good passer. He's a very unselfish kid, and he's a very nice, humble kid. Almost like from a Duke comparison standpoint, his body is nowhere similar, but kind of like Chris Carrawell played, where he could play 2 or 3 positions and facilitate, and he can step in and be a point guard. He can score from the wings. He's very unselfish and easy to play with. Like him a lot. He looks every bit of the part of a top 20 kid, maybe even a little bit higher.
Yeah, he's a good player. He's been fun to watch and follow. It'll be interesting. Again, like these others, I know he downplays his interest a little bit with schools, particularly Duke, so people get a little alarmed about that. But you and I both know when he talks about Duke, he lights up quite a bit. So, I think Duke fans can expect the Blue Devils to have a pretty good shot with Max Christie. Moving on to Trevor Keels. Here's a guy that, to me, is different from anybody else we're talking about. He's played with Jeremy Roach. He's got that close relationship with him, but he's not going to jump off the screen with athleticism. He's not going to jump off the screen with quickness or anything like that. But he's like this blue collar, to me, just my opinion, is this blue collar guy. He's a big, strong body. And I think that's what sets him apart from all these other guards. He's not really going to blow by guys all the time, but where he really can put pressure on his opponents is through his physicality. I think he keeps guys honest with his jumper. He can shoot from the perimeter. He can knock down those shots. Maybe I haven't seen him so much in transition in that regard. He's really a set shooter, a guy that works well within the system from that regard. But really his ability to bully guys when he's got the ball, and even defensively, he will get physical with guys, and I think it rattles some of his opponents. At least that's what I've seen with him at USA Basketball and at the top 100. High-level talent, wasn't really expecting him to be that type of player that would rough him up a little bit. Am I reading him wrong, or what's your thoughts on him? You've seen him probably more than I have.
Yeah, and I just most recently saw him in the Virginia Independent State Finals. Paul Six actually won the event, and I went down there. That was probably, right before this coronavirus stuff started. I went down and watched him live there, and I watched him for 2 games. And, he's kind of like a Paul Pierce sort of player. Maybe a little bit of Chris Jenkins from Villanova sort of build. He's about 6'5", average arm length, all that stuff, but his body is not prototype. It's like, he's not going to be that guy that jumps out on the YouTube videos and the mixtapes and that sort of stuff. Like, if you watch that, you'll appreciate his game, but he's the type of guy you got to watch play in a system. He's the type of guy you got to watch how he moves without the ball. He's a great shooter from the perimeter. He can square those shoulders up and get it out of his hand quick. And like you said, he's got that strong body. So when he starts driving, he can kind of throw his shoulder and his hip into you, which is probably what I would do to you if I was playing. But he gets people off of him and creates space, and he's just a natural born scorer. He rebounds. He's a smart defender. Very fundamentally sound player, and the kind of guy that can go to the NBA and play there a long time.
Yeah, I think I really like what you said with him being a guy that is not going to really grab the attention if you watch YouTube highlights, but you've got to see him play. And I think that's a great thing to tell Duke fans that are watching this right now, that their only exposure has been the YouTube videos or the Rivals.com highlights. Because you're right. I mean, it's not something you watch and you don't necessarily like, oh, yeah, that's a top 25 kid or anything. But when you see him work in a system and you see him in person and see how he plays with teammates and understands the game, you realize what a good fit this guy could be for Duke. And you get excited about him. I know that was the case for me. And when you talk to him as well, he's such a nice kid, and he understands how to fit into systems. I mean, he wants to fit in. He doesn't want to, go in with this mentality of this is my game, this is what I'm going to do. He wants to adapt to fit in, and that's that perfect role set up for the guys that have been successful at Duke that have that mentality. When you think of the Jack Whites, you think of Justin Robinson, the guys lately, that we've seen. Duke's historically had guys that can play that role and be successful. And I think he'll have a bigger role than those guys. I don't want to be misinterpreted with that if he were to come to Duke or wherever he's going to be. But he's got that mindset of team first, and everything else will kind of fall in line for him. So that right there, I think we've talked a lot about all these guys on the list. There's one more question, and there's some other guys we could have talked about, and we'll get to those at a later time. But I do want to ask, and I kind of hinted to this just a little bit ago, but for a guy that's not on the radar right now for Duke and might have been able to capitalize on this evaluation period that we're not seeing right now, who would be the player that you would see jump off the page in that regard, and that probably would have forced Duke's hand as a coaching staff to be like, we've got to be involved?
For me, the answer is easy. It's Chet Holmgren. I would probably say at this point, Chet Holmgren is he's my favorite player in 2021 that I've seen. And you probably agree too, because you and I just loved watching him at USA. And then, at NBA camp, I watched him a lot too. He wasn't really on either one of the schools' radars that I covered, Duke or North Carolina. But there's no play alike for Chet Holmgren. He is a 7'1" wing forward. Now, you can label him a center because he'll block a lot of shots near the rim, and he'll probably, do the rim run thing and get a lot of open floor dunks. But his skill set is that of a wing forward at 7'1". So when you look at the NBA, you think about if Chet Holmgren lived in Europe and we had never heard of him and his name was Darko whatever, or whatever name you want to give him, he would be so hyped and I think he's a lottery pick, and he's not even physically developed. This is a guy who's 7'1", probably no more than 199 pounds at 7'1". So you can imagine how slender he is. He's got very narrow shoulders, which you would sometimes think would be a derogatory thing, but the way he's able to slice through the lane and kind of snake around or people inside, it's almost Gumby-like the way he can get to that rim. But the other thing is he's actually really tough. He's a tough kid, and he'll go right at guys like Day'Ron Sharpe, who's 6'10", 250, and a grown man. And it doesn't look like a 199-pound guy against a 245, 250-pound man. He holds his own physically, but his ability to handle and shoot and move around and play all over the floor comfortably and handle that ball in tight spaces around little 6'3" guys, I've never seen anything like it. He's a tremendous skilled athlete and one of the best shot blockers I've ever seen, because the apex of his jump is probably about 12.5 feet. He is blocking shots way above the rim, and he's blocking them help side. He's just a tremendous basketball prospect.
Yeah, I mean, you said everything I would have said about him. He is, and I want to be careful. I don't want to say by far, because I don't want other recruits and prospects to feel like I'm slighting them, because I'm not. But he is at the top of my list for the class. And it's funny to me because I know when we went to USA basketball, or maybe it was NBA camp, it was one of the two, that you were telling me all about Chet Holmgren. And I'm looking at him, and I can be hard to convince about a player. I've got to see it. And I'm like, no, come on. This guy is so thin. There's no way. And then the first thing I see, maybe it was USA, because the first thing I see is against Day'Ron Sharpe. And Sharpe was pretty convinced that, okay, I've got the ball. I'm going to attack this basket. And I remember Chet Holmgren having none of it. I thought, here's this 195-pound guy who met Sharpe at the rim and denied him. And from that point forward, it answered all my questions about his toughness. And you can't do like I did and make that assumption, because he is so thin that he's not tough and he can't absorb contact and he can't play with bigger guys. Now, having said that, he's obviously got to put on more weight and get stronger at the college level and the NBA level. Those guys will be able to use that to their advantage if he's, when he's attacking the basket and that kind of thing. But the thing that just blows me away about him, like you're talking about him being that wing, that three, that forward that can really attack the basket, is that handle. Bigs have no shot at defending him. None. And the same when you look at guards. They might be quick enough to maybe stay in front of him, but he's so long, he can still get his shot off. He can get to the basket. And as a defender, I don't know what you do with this guy because he's so skilled. It just blows me away. And I think for me, from a Duke perspective, this is the guy, the type of player that Duke's recruited over the years. This is the guy that they look for. And there he is. You can't be deterred by that slender size. For whatever reason, they haven't been involved. I don't know the inner, dealings with all that. So I don't know what they may see that doesn't fit so far, or what they need to see that they haven't had the chance to see yet because they haven't been able to go out and watch him as much. So, I don't want to pretend like I do know those things. So maybe there are, areas that they're looking for that he hasn't met. And there probably are, but I think if they had a chance to see him this summer again, that they would walk away feeling like they had to recruit this guy, at least throw their hat in. Because I know when you and I spoke to him, he spoke highly of Duke. And I think at that point, Coach K had spoken to him back at USA Basketball in October of last year. And he's a guy that you can really have a lot of success with because he can play well with others and he can make a lot of guys better that's around him.
Yeah, and one of the guys that I talked to early on in his recruitment, I developed a relationship with. I don't think he would want me to speak on the record, but he's involved in his recruitment. And one of the things he told me he's really looking for is someone to use Chet in the right way. You're not going to win him over by putting him in the post. You're not going to win him over with not spacing the floor for him where he can isolate and drive those big guys trying to guard him who have no shot. And if you want to put an athletic wing on him who has some length, you still can't guard him because his handle is so clean that it doesn't matter. These guys aren't going to get down low and pick that ball away from him because he's spinning and moving and doing step throughs and step backs and fadeaways. I haven't seen anybody that can guard him. And he had guys like Isaiah Todd trying to guard him and Day'Ron Sharp and Greg Brown, all kinds of elite prospects. And he was just his handle is just so clean that, I get excited talking about him. I don't mind, showing emotion on this Zoom call and talking about him because I think he's a phenomenal prospect. And he's one of my favorite ones to watch. And I tend to get a little excited talking about those guys. But, I think he could be the number one player in the country. I think right now for me, all due respect to these guys I've seen most of the top guys multiple times. And for me, it's a three-way battle between Jonathan Kuminga, Chet Holmgren, and Paolo Banchero. Those are my three top 2021 prospects. And, of course, there's other guys that are going to be in there. Baldwin is good. Kennedy Chandler's up there. There's a lot of guys up there near the top. But for me, those three are the three right now that I see have the best chance of winning that argument at the end of the summer.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's guys that just really get you excited when you see them play. There's always at least one that we come across that we leave, with just this excitement, and we can't wait to see what they do on the next level. And all of these guys have the ability to be successful on the college level, and if they're given the opportunity, they can really be successful in the NBA as well. There are certainly guys that Duke wants to be involved with and that fit the system. Duke never really strays from those things that are important to them. So, yeah, so it's fun to watch these guys, and it's fun to talk about them a little bit. So, Clint, I appreciate you coming on and talking about these guys with me for a little bit. Hopefully we'll have some more guys to dive into. Hopefully next month or the month after, I don't know, we can actually see some guys and we'll have something new to report on in terms of players' games and how they've improved and how they've advanced their skill set. So I'm looking forward to maybe the day we can go out and watch basketball again.
Absolutely. And it's good seeing you, man. I appreciate seeing you. I haven't seen you all spring. And even though you're wearing the baseball cap of the second best team in the NL East, I still like you.
Yeah, I still like you too, even though you are wearing that Nationals hat. I mean, I do feel good about us winning our series with you guys. I don't feel good about you guys winning the World Series and we got sent home by a team we should have beat. But that's another story. That's for another day. But anyway, hopefully we'll have baseball back soon too, and we can kind of cheer on our teams with that. But all right, Clint, we'll do this again sometime soon. Devils Illustrated fans, follow him at Clint Jackson 1 on Twitter. Follow me at Brian Rivals on Twitter. And check out some of our videos. We've talked to a lot of our class of 2020 signees. So check those out. Those are pretty fun to listen to some of the future Blue Devils and what they've got to say. So we'll see you next time. And everybody have a good one.